Okay, welcome. My name is Trey Calvin. I'm the Communications Director for the Center for Applied Linguistics. And today you have tuned into our 30-minute webinar entitled Family Engagement and Digital Equity, which is part of the Center for Applied Linguistics Research to Policy series, in which we've been delving into critical conversations in language education through the lens of digital equity. I would like to turn it over to today's host for the webinar, the Director of World Languages at the Center for Applied Linguistics, Francesca de Silvio. Francesca holds a master's degree from Georgetown University in linguistics and has managed test development for multiple K through 12 state assessment projects at AIR and Cal. In addition to test development projects, Francesca has managed multi-year research study investigating student language learning outcomes from study abroad, overseeing data collection from 150 students, 90 host families in Peru, Chile, China, and Russia. Thank you for agreeing to host us today, Francesca. And with that, take it away.
Okay, thanks so much, Trey. I'm very happy to be here. And first, I'm going to introduce the first of our featured speakers. So we have David Valade. He is the Language Acquisition Support Lead in the Office of Language Acquisition at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or DESE. Prior to joining DESE in 2012, David was the EL director in Holyoke, Massachusetts, EL coach and ESL teacher for 17 years. And while working at DESE, David worked closely with us at Cal to develop online training modules for English Learner Parent Advisory Councils, or LPACs for short, in 2019 to 2020. And this year, he started a multi-year project to support a statewide parent leadership network for LPAC leaders. So thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to introduce Dr. Shondel Nero, who is a member of the Cal Board of Trustees and Professor of Language Education in the Department of Teaching and Learning in the Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development at NYU. Shondel is also the author of a new book on climate change skepticism entitled The Power of Narrative, Climate Skepticism and the Deconstruction of Science, which was published in October 2020.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Good afternoon all, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. I have the great honor to introduce our other guest today, Dr. Diane Rodriguez, who is a professor in the Department of Curriculum and Teaching at Fordham University. And Professor Rodriguez specializes in bilingual and special education, and she's been a staunch advocate for bilingual families, especially those with special needs. She's also served as a consultant in the New York State Department of Education and bilingual education, especially in world languages. And she has also been named by Univision as a member of the Orgullo de la Comunidad, Pride of our Community, for the wonderful work she's done. She's also an international scholar. She's done work in the Dominican Republic. And a little tidbit, she is building a school in Kenya. So we have the perfect guest today for our conversation on family engagement, in particularly with regard to equity, especially in this COVID era. I don't want to say post-COVID yet. I guess we're still working our way through. So I'm going to begin by posing the first question to David and then Diane. First question is, what challenges over the past year have you had engaging bilingual families in schooling for especially bilingual children? And also, what tools are teachers and families already using?
Thank you, Shondel, and thank you, Francesca, for having me here today. I'd like to answer this question really at a more broad level, but I think it's really important speaking as a representative from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Last spring, when basically everything shut down and we started working from home, we started getting a lot of messages from our districts, from our health directors, saying a lot of our kids and our families don't have access to the internet. They're home. How are we going to teach them? And that was really the beginning of a lot of inspirational work, I would like to say. We worked really hard to help pull us together. But I before I even talk about what we did as an department, I think a real shout out needs to go to the staff and in the districts and the teachers that really made that effort to make sure that that their students and their families had the Chromebooks, the iPads, whatever those computers were, and made arrangements to get Wi-Fi and internet access to kids. And meanwhile, the department itself was able to provide some grants for districts to purchase and get more materials and to get internet, so that I know that it wasn't 100%, but I think that was so huge to help get this foundation for all of our children and families to be connected to the internet. Otherwise, we would be in a much more difficult place than we are right now. As far as the next question is about tools that families and teachers are using to connect, well, I know I've been connecting through Zoom to all our directors and families. Phones are still working. Text is working. A lot of apps are going around, like WeChat is one that folks would use. Facebook is very popular too, and for districts who have Google platforms, the Google Meets and those apps and technology are being used at this point.
Thank you. I mean, it's amazing just the list of stuff that David just named. 3 years ago, most people may not have heard of WeChat and all of these various tools, and yet when in the middle of a crisis, people become creative and think of all these various ways to get access to help children. And Diane, you want to take it from there? What challenges?
Yeah, well, there have been many challenges, but first of all, thank you for having me on board. In response to that COVID-19 pandemic question, educators everywhere have faced the question of how to meet the needs of their students through distance learning. And this has been a big challenge, not only in New York City, but worldwide in the United States. And for some, this is achieved using virtual instruction like Zoom or Google Classroom or combination, while others, it means providing packets of learning activities. And in many cases, the shift to distant instruction has proved to be challenging, but especially in the case of parents who are trying to support their culturally and linguistically diverse kids and how they're going to address those instructional needs at home. So the challenges that I have heard and I have witnessed has been lack of support, healthcare concern, accessibility issues, and financial struggle. For example, in some families in New York City was temporary or permanent loss of their jobs, and how will they support their kids for basic needs such as food. So in New York, they had EBT, that is the food money that was distributed to all families. So if the kid was not able to go to school, the family will have at least some money to buy the food or go into the school and get the breakfast and the lunch. Other aspect of it was, as Dave was mentioning, was access to technology. Another big challenge was supervising the children's home learning. Another big challenge was if they had kids with disability and more siblings, how they were going to share the computer or their tablets. The lack of electronic devices and the internet and fast internet. And as all of the resources that we could have provided in New York City, there were still many challenges for family engaging in this critical time. Particularly, what strategies will I use to teach second language? Because many of these parents are working 2, 3 jobs, and many of them do not know the curriculum of the school system, or they do not know the process of teaching their kids. They're just thinking about there's a teacher, let the teacher do the teaching for my kids. So one of the things that we try to do with family engagement was building positive relationships with communication and sharing decisions. And this was challenging because you needed to know how were you going to communicate with parents in an educational environment. The other aspect of it, not only in New York, was in other countries. For example, in Kenya, they were distributing packets in rural areas because they do not have access to the internet or access to computers. In
Wow.
other countries like the Dominican Republic, they were using WhatsApp, and that's how they were delivering the instruction. And then as the pandemic continues to shut things down, they started teaching on the TV. So they will have 2 hours to teach certain subjects, and kids will be listening to the teachers on the public channel. So different countries have used different ways of operating throughout this pandemic. But the biggest challenge is in the United States, where we had so many resources and we were not ready. And technologically, many educators were not ready, and many families were not ready to use this technology device. So the
Wow.
Department of Education came up with a couple of resources for the teachers, and the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages, and I think you're going to get the link shortly on your chat. They created several curriculum for technology and the 21st century. Not
Wow.
only that, they also created tools on teaching how to write. And then because they have grant money, they partner with NYU and with Fordham with the Regional Bilingual Educational Network. And the Auburn from NYU has a lot of resources for cognate so parents can understand the content of the curriculum. And at Fordham with the Regional Bilingual Educational Resource Network, what they were doing was working with teachers on how to engage the families. So those are the ways that they have been connecting and things that we have been trying to do.
Thank you so much. That's really a wealth of information. And I'm going to turn it over back to Francesca to follow up on this really important discussion.
Yeah, thanks so much, Diane. I think you did talk about some of the projects you're working on. So let me turn to David and then we can come back to you. David, can you tell us about in your work, what kinds of activities and strategies for family engagement are you using to connect with families of multilingual learners?
Okay, I would, yeah, definitely. I think one of the things I'd like to share, Diane had mentioned about the online curriculum. We haven't posted an online curriculum, but we do have on the department a COVID site, and the Office of Language Acquisition has a lot of resources there for parents directly. And I think that that piece here of connecting with parents is kind of interesting because I've been working recently worked with Cal to develop some training modules for parent leaders of English learner parent advisory councils, and that work has taken my work directly with parents to a different level. As an office, we really work more directly with L directors and districts, and not so much with parents directly. But since this project for the LPAC training has built, there's been a lot more opportunity to work with parents and to connect with them. And so what we're doing this year is to elevate the LPAC module trainings and connect ourselves with parents and help parents connect with each other, so they're not isolated. And this year we had a webinar in the fall to share and just share what we have posted online for the LPAC trainings. But then the next piece was, let's get parents together virtually. That was a bit of a challenge because we decided we use Zoom, realizing it's probably not the best, but we had to make that work. We need to ensure that parents could be engaged, and we also had to provide translation or interpretation online, which Zoom does a really nice job when you're all in the same space. When we want to take breakout rooms, Zoom's not prepared for that. So we had a lot of, it was very interesting. We actually used different Zoom accounts to get into breakout rooms. So we had 7 languages being interpreted simultaneously during the training and in the breakout rooms. And it was really exciting because this was the first time the feedback from parents was, this is great. We should do more of this. And it was one of the nice things about, or one of the benefits that has come through this time is that people have been learning to connect virtually, where before you would need to travel, you need to make arrangements. Parents could come together 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 days in a week, and actually I was looking at every parent that attended the first day also attended the second day. Not so much the educators; they were too busy, I guess, but the parents really love this. And so now we have a listserv, a group of LPAC leaders from across the state who are able to connect with each other. A few of them have reached out to me directly to say, hey, what about this? What about that? Can you help me? Or can you connect me with somebody else? Which is the whole piece of helping parents connect with each other. Another piece besides the parents piece is also we're working with community organizations who work directly with families, which is really, really important because we don't get that. We don't get the opportunity to work with them as closely as they do, such as Federation for Children with Special Needs. They were a huge partner to help us connect with families and their advocates, as well as in the department itself, we have the Office of Students and Families that were also able to provide a lot of connections for us, and then of course working with interpreters. So it's that's the really big, exciting piece that's been going on here. We're really looking forward to building this out next year to have more opportunities for parent leaders to get together and really connect with each other. Hopefully, could be online, but I think it would also be nice to be able to have opportunities like that in person.
Thanks, David. That was great. A lot of information. Let me pass it back to Diane just to see if you want to talk a bit more about projects you've worked on or respond to any of those, especially if you have anything about connecting parents with each other. It's great to hear.
Well, one of the things that I want to also reiterate is that at the beginning of this pandemic and the equity of language learners in the city, there was a group of advocators working to address the technology aspect. So they made sure that every family had laptops or tablet and that they had hotspot or Wi-Fi so the students can connect. Another aspect, what the department was trying to do was considering families' work schedules and availability so they could have family engagement and allow flexibility to do assignments completion. The other aspect of meaningful support was providing the families one-on-one instructional support for their student. And this was directing parents or students to homework hotlines or online supports that they could work in that particular subject with the kids. And they provided the written and verbal information in the family's native language. So they were very quick to understand how important was to have the family engagement. At this time, after over a year and a half, looking back, probably most likely, if we know what we know now, we would have been faster. But this caught everybody by surprise on how to engage the families to be able to work in collaboration with the schools and the teachers.
Wonderful. Thanks, Diane. Just following up, I mean, you guys, both you and David, really laid out a lot of very good concrete, both the challenges, but also the resourceful ways that we've had to think about how we connect with these families, not just a question of technology and access, but all of the other social factors, work schedule, poverty, all of the other things, accessibility that affect how we are able to help particularly bilingual children. And back to David and then Diane. Part of this series has to do with, research to policy. So if you had a magic wand and you could come up with creating or changing one policy that would help educators and families connect, what would that be? What would be that one thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I, I was thinking about it. I think one piece is free universal access. I mean, whether we're talking about virtual world, but free universal access to computers and internet, wherever families are, they should be able to have that. It should be a right just as much as clean water and safety. I mean, that really is. We can't see the internet and associated technology as something that's for some but not others. It really should be for everybody else. Um, so that would be my big one. I also would like to say that translation interpretation services must be ready on demand, and that's something, you know, it's in the law, but it's not practiced that well. So I don't know how to make that happen for everybody. That's my magic wand, but that's what I'd like to see.
And Diane, what about you? What would
I
be your
would love,
magic wand?
I would love to see the 4 C's: coordination, collaboration, communication, and continuity for all English learners and students. Academic support, where families who are ready to engage in these instructions are supported in all levels. That the school system, the Department of Education understands factors that are affecting family engagement and student academic learning based on their background, the resources available, the home and the culture and the linguistic. If they take all of that into consideration, they will be able to show students how school works connect to the work, or ideals, value in their community, and the roles and expectations that they may encounter in the future work.
Oh my God, we sound like we have the nice package wrapped in a bow here, but I'm sure that's not the end of it, Francesca.
Yeah, I think we've solved it with your solutions here, but let's see what questions we have from the audience. I see a couple and we'll see what we can get to. So the first one is for David. If you could tell us just a bit more about Zoom's capacity for translation, or how you got around it. How did you actually do the translation into 7 languages? Did you use software? Did you have translators? What did you do?
We hired an interpretation company, and when you're in the main room with Zoom and interpreters, it's just a matter of following the directions, getting the interpreters emails in there, and then they are on the channel, of course, prepping with them, and so they know what to translate and interpret. So it's really just a matter of the user, the participant, to click on the button on the bottom there and choose and select their language, and that their interpreter will be right in their ear at that time. For the breakout rooms, it was a little bit different because we couldn't do that. And I think we did good. We didn't lose, I don't think we really lost anybody. But when it was ready to go to breakout rooms, we would change the Zoom address to one of my colleagues' Zoom addresses for each one. So folks would click on that link, and then they would enter that breakout room, and we had interpreters as well. So we hired quite a few interpreters for this, as you can imagine, but that's the way it should have been done, and it was fantastic. We did have a couple rooms where we didn't, where we identified who would be in those rooms. So we didn't have to have interpreters for all the languages represented. We make sure that the languages of the parents that were in the rooms were represented.
Great, thanks for that detail. That's really helpful. And I'll direct the next question to Diane, and then maybe back to you, Dave, if we have time. So the question is, how can we continue this good work after the pandemic? How do we make sure that we don't go back to pre-pandemic isolation or divide between parents and schools?
Well, that's a very good question. I believe that what we need to continue doing is being prepared, having this communication and collaboration, and having a plan. If we have a plan about if something happens and we need to close down, how are we going to do the social engagement for the students? What type of activities are available already that we can improve to make it work so students are not isolated? Because another major issue has been mental health for many students, that they have felt isolated. So we need to make sure that we have a support system where we have counselors, school psychologists, educators, parents involved. So that's where the collaboration comes into place, and having people who speak the language of that particular group is not only one particular language, but being able to communicate culturally and linguistically with that family to have those key personnel.
And Diane, while I have you, we have a question. Could you repeat again the 4 C's? I think everyone wanted to hear those.
The 4 Cs, Diane.
Yeah, okay, you want the 4 C's. The 4 C's was collaboration, it was communication, it was continuation, and I'm missing one right now. Coordination, collaboration, communication, and continuity.
Great. And speaking of continuity, I'll go back to David. What would you suggest? What do you think about making sure that we keep some of these successes and continue engagement after the pandemic, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later?
I agree with Diane. Definitely having to have a plan. I think that about what to do if something like this should happen again, but to build off of our successes, we found that we can operate in the virtual world, but also we need to really make sure that not everybody is doing that. We need to be able to reach out to our families. We need to be able to speak their languages, have cultural brokers. We can't just rely on the kindness of staff. We need to do this professionally. We need to find the folks who can do this. We need to reach out. There are a lot of community organizations that do that work closely with our families, but not quite so closely with our schools and our districts. And we need to bridge that gap, because it really is a community that we're all together. Schools are not isolated from everywhere else. Our children are not isolated from everybody else. But I think sometimes our school districts feel that way. So we need to be able to bridge that gap culturally and linguistically.
Great. And let me see, maybe one more question. I'll start with you, David, just because I know you're in the districts. So one of our participants pointed out that in 2020 and 2021, many families switched to homeschooling because of the issues with online learning. What do you think about this tendency specifically for families that speak languages other than English?
This is families are home language teaching at home in another language. Is that
Yeah,
the
or
question?
just the switch to homeschooling. Do you see students coming back? Do you see ways that you can encourage, kind of faith in the public schools for those families that made that decision?
I have heard that many families are not sending their children back. There's a statistic out there that enrollment has dropped for English learners. So that's something that I'd be concerned about. I guess I have to leave it at that.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say that point is like really important to think about. Now that we are in this phase of should we go back or not, and thinking about what have we learned? Why is it that some families don't want their kids to go back? And I think that speaks to some of the, back to those 4 C's about what are, if we keep the communication going to understand what are the factors that are driving those family decisions. Is it financial? Is it mental health? Is it logistics? Access to it, or all of the above. So I think those are really important considerations as we think about ways to engage family. Francesca?
I think Trey's going to jump in because we're going to wrap up, but thank you so much, everyone, for your great responses and questions from the audience.
Yeah, thanks to Diane and David for amazing pointers and so concrete. Hopefully our audience can take away lots of good things to think about.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us, Diane, David, and for hosting Francesca and Shondel. I wanted to remind our audience that a recording of this webinar will be available in about 24 hours, and we'll send that out to you in an email, along with the resources and the 4 C's enumerated as Diane has pointed them out to us. Just want to say thank you for attending our webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar in mid-August. So take a look at cal.org and you can sign up there. Okay. Thank you very much again. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.